Okay, friends, welcome back. Welcome. So now we are going to Montreal, Canada, and our next lecture is awaiting for us. It's a great honor for me, dear friends, to introduce you Joshua Dolgin, also known as Socalled. Josh, the microphone is yours.
Gilgul Funanign, The Reincarnation and Rebirth of a Melody by I.L. Peretz, in which a Chassid tells what song means to him. Melodies are of all kinds. There are melodies that cheer the soul and those that sadden the heart. Some melodies can raise one to great heights. Others can cast one down into the depths. Melodies are living things. Life is revealed through melody. The forest sings, fields sing. All nature offers song to the Creator. Melodies die and are forgotten, but melodies come to life again through memory. It lives again to comfort and raise the human soul and move the spirit once again. Gilgul Funanign is an amazing short story by I.L. Peretz, the great Yiddish writer, that tells of a song that travels and the traveling of this melody through different places and times, and how the same song is used in different times and places. It's a beautiful story. You should check it out. And I'm reading this little passage, this little translation of it, is on the back of a record by Noach Nachbush. I'll get to him in a minute. And to get to him, I'm going to have to tell you a bit of my own story of how I got into Yiddish song and my own little Gilgul, my own little transmigration of melody, and how I've come home, in a way, to Yiddish music, even though that wasn't really my home, but it's the home of my culture and the home of my ancestors and the home of my people. So I'd sort of like to call this talk, So You Want to Be a Yiddish Singer? Because actually I sort of don't know the level of the participants of who's going to be at this talk. So I want to make it accessible to as many people as possible and relevant and useful in your practice if you're a Yiddish singer, if you're a Yiddish musician, or just any kind of musician, if you're someone interested in Yiddish song, in Yiddish culture. Hopefully this there'll be enough sort of information and little facts, and hopefully you'll learn something new. But more hopefully, I will give you a couple of my tools as a performer to bring Yiddish song to life today. I mean, I'm not an ethnomusicologist. I'm not a historian. I am not a what else am I not? I'm not a lot of things. I'm more of a performer. So I kind of leave the ethnomusicology and the history and the linguists. I leave that work to them. There's so many amazing people doing that work. My work is more producing, performing, and actively enacting this stuff as best I can. So there's so many resources, there's so many masters and experts in this music that I encourage you to, do the research. And if you want the history and the ethnomusicology, read the books by these great scholars that we have still in our midst. Some of the great writers on this topic are our friends and colleagues. So I can't pretend to be an expert on Yiddish and an expert on the Jewish people, in the Ashkenazic Jewish people. Part of what I've done is, as a performer, is that I now have to be an archaeologist and an ethnomusicologist. That's part of the gig now, as a person interested in Yiddish music. If you weren't one of the lucky people raised with this Mama Loshen and raised with this language, then you've got to discover it for yourself. And it presents unique challenges as a singer of Yiddish songs because it's not just getting the words right or even just the melody. There's sort of a whole style that comes with singing Yiddish song that isn't natural to me, at least. I didn't grow up with it in my ear. If I'd grown up in the shtetl, in a living Yiddish microcosm world, then I'd have these rhythms and melodies and harmonies and ways to ornament and I'd have all those things that make up a style. They would just be in me, easy, no problem. Well, I didn't. I grew up in Canada, which is where I'm talking to you from today. Greetings from Canada. And my parents were assimilated Jews. Their parents were from Romania, were from Ukraine, were from Belarus, were from Czech Republic. They were from this cradle of this Yiddish civilization. But when they got to Canada, they wanted to assimilate, they wanted to fit in. It's an old story. And my parents didn't grow up with Yiddish. So I didn't grow up with Yiddish. I'm sort of getting ahead of myself, but I'd just like to, maybe I should just do that and get it out of the way and tell you my own story and how I came to Yiddish music. So, I'm in Canada. I'm actually in my room, my childhood bedroom, since March. I've been living with my parents. As you may or may not have noticed, that there's a bit of a pandemic going on. So I came back here, which is where I was born. It's in Quebec. It's in the province of Quebec, in a little town called Chelsea near Ottawa. And I grew up here. My parents lived here because my dad worked for the government, and Ottawa is the capital of Canada, so it's a big government town. So they moved here in the late 60s and 70s, and when they weren't being diplomats for a while. That's another story too. So I grew up here. We were the only Jewish family in this little town, which is sort of hard to imagine, but it's true. Going through school, I was the only Jewish kid in my class. I was the only Jewish kid in high school. The only other Jewish family in this town is the vet, Dr. Froimovich. And so we were sort of isolated as Jews, but we would drive into Ottawa, which is the capital, like I said, to go to synagogue. And basically we would go for the high holidays and, some Shabboses and to prepare for bar mitzvahs. I'm the youngest of 3 boys, so a lot of bar mitzvahs. And there we would learn to read Hebrew and to say it out loud and to sing it even, but not really understand what we were saying. And that was always frustrating for me, just to put in this effort to perform, but not know what I'm saying. Like, why are we doing this? And if I did try to understand it, I was doubly frustrated because, to me, I'm just not a very religious person. And so the stories of the Bible are interesting and historical and, yeah, fascinating. But I've never been really a believer in the Jewish religion per se. That being said, the traditions are lovely and the history is amazing, and to be a part of this ancient story and to feel like kind of special, being the only Jewish family in this little town, it was just like this weird part of my identity that was interesting for me. But it wasn't like personally interesting. Like I didn't find myself in the Bible stories, or frankly in the other major sort of story of assimilated North American Jews, which is the story of the nation state, the Jewish state of Israel, which I've always found to be problematic, to say the least. I mean, it's a wonderful place, and I'm glad we have Israel, and I'm proud of Israel. But there's a lot of problems, and we still haven't managed to work it out. So that's always been kind of kind of troubling part of my Jewish self identity. Also, it's just sort of what people assume you to be as a Jew. Okay, you pray to God, and you have this Jewish state, this Israel. So, but I've never been to Israel, and I never believed in God. So who am I as a Jew? I was figuring it out, and yeah. So that's part of the story. That's the Jewish part of my story. And then the other part that's relevant to our discussion today, which is a very weird discussion to have when there's nobody here, so I'm just talking to nobody, and it's weird. Okay. Thanks for coming, though. And thanks, Mark and Shendel, for organizing this. Bravo. And thanks for having me here. It's really fun. And it's scary. The other part that I need to tell you about is my musical sort of history, which is, in a word, I was forced to take piano lessons as a kid. I learned classical. I was a bad reader. I learned everything by ear. And with that, I got pretty far along, actually, and entered competitions and did exams and played piano. In high school, my mom let me take jazz piano, and with jazz piano, it was like, wow, I can improvise, I can express myself. I didn't really have much to say, but the possibility was there, and to be taught a language of sort of more about just music, the idea of music, as opposed to specific pieces that I learned and performed. So I started playing jazz, and in high school I got a keyboard, and I started to play in bands around town. And for some reason I got in with like a world music sort of scene, and I was 15 and I was in a Latin salsa band. And it was like this big band with singers and a horn section and me playing keys. And that led to a gospel band, and then I was this little kid in a gospel band, and then I was in a Venezuelan band, and then I got into sort of a hippie like rock band, and then a funk band, and I was playing keyboards and playing music and learning world music before I even knew the word world music. I was just learning musics from different cultures. And that was fun. And but meanwhile, I was getting into hip hop. It's the 90s, and the music of the teenagers and the music of the cool kids was hip hop and rap music. And it was really the golden age of rap music. This was post the beginning, like the birth of hip hop, which is in the early 80s, and it sort of was getting really sophisticated, and it was becoming this force. And it was actually before rap and hip-hop was really mainstream. It was still kind of a subculture, and it came from America, and it came from African-American tradition, and it came from the ghettos of America. And these kids, because they were very young too, it was a very young movement, these children, well, teenagers and young people, were talking about their experience. And they were using the music of their tradition, which is African American music and all that entails, and they were updating it with new technologies to be themselves and to talk to the people of today and to be reporters from the streets and cultural critics and poets, using wordplay and using language and music to come out of like pretty difficult circumstances. These kids came from the ghetto, and they were using the means that they had to make music. And one of those means was to be a DJ and to use vinyl records to make new music. Turntables and turntablists, like, that wasn't designed to be an instrument. It was designed to play music. So these kids that became the founders of hip hop, people like Grandmaster Flash or DJ Kool Herc or Africa Bambaataa, they took these turntables and turned them into instruments. And they took these old records from their record collections and they started to chop them up and loop them, looking for little breaks to create these textures, these musical sort of textures and musical canvases upon which they could paint new music. So you take a little break from a disco song, you loop it, and then you talk over it. And it was a revolution, and it was using a new technology to make very fresh music out of old music. And for me, it was the music of the day. I really loved African American funk music, and I loved James Brown and Parliament Funkadelic in high school. And then to hear rap music, which was to me just absolutely connected in the evolution of music to that older African American music tradition. You've got this old funky music, and now you listen to Snoop Dogg. Well, he's sampled George Clinton, and he's got those funky beats, but now there's a new talk over top of it, and there's new sort of more concise rhythms going on, and it's sort of simplified, but it's also more complicated. And then it has this scratching, and it has a dance involved with it, this break dancing, and it has graffiti, this graphic art component to the culture. So there's this whole culture of hip hop. But I am a little Jewish kid in Canada, a white Jewish kid. So what claim do I have to that culture? Well, other than it being the culture of the time, of the day, and of the radio, it wasn't my culture, and I felt weird participating in it. I had to find my way in it. I had to find a voice. This was before everybody rapped and everybody used hip-hop in whatever music they were using. Now hip-hop is everywhere. Hip-hop is the discourse. Hip-hop is all pop music. It's all made on computers using loops. So it all came from there. It all came from hip-hop. Maybe that's a little simple, and it came from a lot of other places too, but hip-hop just really became this global phenomenon and became a way for young people without much to be able to express themselves and to be able to participate and make music in the 21st century. So I started to participate in the rap culture, and I got a little drum machine, and I got a 4-track recorder, and I started to, and then I got a sampler. Now the sampler is key to this whole story, and to my whole story as a Yiddish singer, believe it or not. And a sampler, this is a sampler right here, and this is actually, it's basically the same one I've had for 20 years, and this is totally out of date. This is an antique now. So I got a sampler. A sampler is a computer, basically, that only does sound. So everything that my sampler can do, my computer could do, but not vice versa. So all it does is record sound and let you edit the sound. And then you take these little bits and you make it into music. So at first I started like all my, rap producer heroes like DJ Premier or Prince Paul or the RZA. They sample. They take records like this Noah Nachbush record, and they look for a moment in the record where it's just one sound isolated, okay? And they take that little sound, and then they keep looking at other records, and they collect a bunch of sounds from different sources and mix them together, okay? So I started to look first at my parents' record collection, because I didn't have many records. I was young, okay? So, and I looked through their records, and there was some Russian music, and there was some Latin American music and jazz and some Four Freshmen records. and then there was a few records by this guy, Theodore Bickel. And growing up, he was the only Jewish music I'd really ever heard. He was the only records, his were the only records I had on vinyl. And I always loved it. I didn't really know what it was, but so I started to sample that. I started to sample the Russian music. I wanted to put myself into hip-hop. I wanted to put my history and the history of my parents into the music. Just as with rap, the rap producers at the beginning looked at their parents' record collections, at the African American music that was part of their parents' record collections. I mean, a lot of these first DJs were from Jamaica, and they had reggae, and then funk and disco and soul, so they could draw from their own musical traditions and sort of update it. Well, for Yiddish music, it's a little bit more complicated because of the rupture that happened. I mean, sure, African Americans had a huge rupture with being brought from Africa. I mean, that's an unimaginable rupture. But then, not even but they managed to hold on to some of their traditions and develop them. And with Jewish music, it's the same. There was a huge rupture with the Holocaust and with the assimilation of the Jews in America, with the foundation of Israel and with the Soviet repression of Jewish traditions that happened during the Soviet era. So a lot of people forgot, wanted to forget, or just were lazy, or made it a choice to not speak Yiddish, to not listen to this music anymore. So for a Yiddish person interested in the Yiddish music who wanted to update the music, it wasn't just a clean sort of updating of taking the old tradition, adding new technology. No, we need to like do a whole relearning. And of course, with the work of the Yiddish revival in the 1970s, that work has been a lot easier for people of the next generation. And now people of our generation, I hope, have made it even easier for the next generation, especially with all the resources that are now available online. Just everything, you can see and hear everything. It's now at the tips of your fingers. It used to be a bit more of a complicated dynamic to try to track things down. And that was the dynamic that I got involved in as a producer. Started to collect old records, and this was my in to Yiddish song, looking for samples. This was the late 90s, and people were throwing out their record collections. The CD had come, the compact disc, and so people thought, okay, let's get rid of our records. And so I started to really, it was the perfect time to collect records. And I started to find, I mean, at first I was just looking for sounds to sample, but at a certain point I started to really, especially when I moved to Montreal to go to university, I started to really find tons of Jewish records that I had no idea about as an assimilated Canadian Jew. So I started to find all this music. And here's a few of them just to show you some of the repertoire, because as a Yiddish singer or somebody who wants to sing Yiddish songs, it's all about finding a repertoire that speaks to you, the songs that you want or you feel you really have a need to sing. And so for me, it all started with these records, and I just wanted to show you some of them. And we're going to really come back to Noach Nachbush in a second. He's going to be sort of, he's the main guy we're going to look at in a minute to look at some of the methods of how to learn these songs. And I just wanted to give you just sort of a general view of the repertoire I'm talking about. So we have someone like Seymour Rexite, who was more of a theater singer, but here he's singing folk songs. Okay, so we got Yiddish folk songs. Here's a Theodore Bickel record. This is the record I grew up with. These songs from Soviet Russia. I don't know if you've heard this. Ben Sion smuggled out tapes, and Bickel recorded them. And a lot of we had the great honor of knowing and working with Theodore Bickel people in this community before he passed away a few years ago. But so to have a real connection to him was amazing. Theodore Bickel, Sidor Bolarski. These are names I did not grow up with. You don't hear this music on the radio. So like I've never heard of Sidor Bolarski. Like, but he's one of the most amazing singers you'll ever hear. This incredible bass baritone singer who sings art song. Okay, so that's another thing to think about. We got folk songs, which are like it sounds like. They're sort of songs without authors, but some of them do have authors, but that people don't know about. But so songs of the folk, just like, you know, village songs about weddings and children and eating and stuff. And then we have art song, which is more sophisticated, more poetic, more sort of literary, maybe musically more sophisticated too, like in terms harmonically and melodically, sort of goes to more complicated places. Yes. I mean, okay. Here's like Cannonball Adderley plays Fiddler on the Roof. So I started to find novelty records or sort of Jewish music with a twist. Okay. Here's Ben Bonus. Amazing shtetl songs. Sort of more folk. He was married to Minna Byrne, who we also got to know at Klez Canada and at festivals like this. Okay, here's klezmer. You know, this guy Danny Rubenstein, 50s American klezmer. Klezmer is, of course, Eastern European instrumental, mostly dance music. Mostly was designed for weddings. The Berry Sisters. So this was kind of an attempt in America to make Yiddish music relevant and to make Yiddish music kind of in American 50s, 60s style arrangements. So it's like not really traditional, but the Berry Sisters came from the tradition. Tants, more klezmer. Okay, so and then records like this with cantors, cantorial music, the music of the synagogue. Oh wow, this one's signed. Cool. So, and just the objects were beautiful, and because they cost 25 cents, you can risk it. You find these in the garbage, you find these at a Salvation Army, you judge a record by its cover, and you say, you know what, I'm going to take this home. So that's another avenue of repertoire to explore, and another source of the Yiddish song. Okay. Here's a guy named Aaron Lebedeff. This was actually one of the first records I found in Montreal randomly at a Salvation Army. And I thought, wow, who is this guy? Okay, so this is Yiddish theater music. Okay, what's Yiddish theater? Okay, so we got art song, we got folk song, we got cantorial music, we have Yiddish theater music, we have nigunim. These are these wordless Hasidic songs from all the Hasidic dynasties, all the various Hasidic like kingships. Each had specific melodies that were written by specific rebbe that were learned. So this whole repertoire that I'd of course never heard of as an assimilated Reform Jewish guy. More Sidor Bolarski, people like Leo Fuld. He was born in Europe. He was born in Rotterdam and incredible singer. Survived the Holocaust. He was in America. Went back. His whole family was killed. He didn't sing a note for 5 years, but then he decided he needed to sing again, so he recorded tons of records. Okay, Mickey Katz. It's klezmer, but with an American twist. Or Bagels and Bongos. This is like a mix again, trying to hippify the Yiddish melodies with new rhythms. Okay, then I started to find this was all still trying to just produce things and sample and make new klezmer music or new Yiddish music that reflected my history and my cultural identity. And I wanted to learn as I'm going through it. It was a way of learning about it. So one of the important threads that if I really wanted to learn how to sing this music, I realized that I needed to learn the music of the neighbors of the Jews, where they lived and where they came from in Eastern Europe. Of course, you can talk to your ethnomusicologist friends about all the influence that happened back and forth between the Jews in their wherever they were living, in Romania, Ukraine, Belarus, Moldova, and Russia. It was one thing to know about Hasidic music, art song, folk song, theater song, cantorial music, and klezmer, but you also need to have a bit of a handle on. Maybe you don't need to know how to do it because it's a whole other art, but you got to know about Romanian music. You got to know about Ukrainian folk music. So I started to find records like this and tons of Romanian music, especially when I started traveling in Europe more and collecting those records. Not just to see the similarities of oh look, that sort of sounds like a Romanian song or whatever, but more importantly to define the differences, because those differences, what set the Yiddish singing apart from Romanian singing, that's super useful and necessary if you want to try to get at what are the sort of salient stylistic like details of Yiddish song, if you want to sing if you want to sing the style right. So Romanian music, these are the resources. This kind of stuff. This is where you get your repertoire. Now, how do you pick your repertoire? You have to, you sort of have to follow your heart, and you have to, you have to sing what what touches you and what speaks to you. At least I did. I just, when I found a Moishe Oisher record, I said, man, I want to sing that. This has got to be sung. I'd never heard anybody really doing Moishe Oisher music today. So I thought, I got to do this. So you got to follow your heart. You should probably think about the repertoire reflecting yourself somehow, or not. If you take a song totally against type that you're going to sing, that could be interesting. But it's interesting if you find a story, a lyric that speaks to you. Maybe it's just an idea that you think is important to talk about. But it just sort of helps if the words that are coming out of your mouth come from a place that's an honest place. So yeah. Okay. What did I want to say? So I think I'd like to spend the rest of this time just talking a bit about my method of how to do this. I didn't grow up with Yiddish. I don't speak Yiddish. So one of the important things about learning to sing Yiddish song is to get a bit comfortable in the language. So what is that? If I was lucky that I was raised to read Hebrew, and when I found Yiddish, it was such a relief that I had this alphabet that instead of reading it and not understanding it, I could read it and actually understand quite a bit of it because of the proximity of the Germanic elements of Yiddish to English. And the English and all the mix that's in Yiddish, I could read it and it was at least comprehensible in a different way, as opposed to ancient Hebrew, which is just a totally different system. It has nothing to do with the languages that I know. So some of the tools of that are like a dictionary. You got to get a good dictionary. This apparently isn't a great dictionary, but it works for me. This is what's his name? Weinreich dictionary. But because I can read Hebrew, I was able to read the Yiddish, and that was super useful. The internet is now the main source of the resource. You can learn about language there, you learn about history there, you learn about you get the repertoire there. It's all available. All these records that I have, they're now on YouTube. So I sort of don't need them anymore, but I love them, and I love the objects, and I love having a sort of tactile connection to the thing that I'm studying. So when I want to learn a song, And I thought for the sake of this little talk that I would start fresh to demonstrate my process of how I would learn a song. There's a song I want to learn from the repertoire of Noach Nachbush. So I heard this many, many years ago, and I sing several songs from Noach Nachbush. And I heard this other song that I think I can do. So the first step is to get the text. So this record didn't come with any text. So the song I want to learn is Rabbeinu Tam. Do you know it? It's a pretty well-known song in the repertoire. And the first step is to find the words. So this is a great resource. These are these books by the Mlotex, and there's 3 volumes of it. These Pearls of Yiddish Song, Miltogena Gesang, and Songs of Generations. And a lot of stuff is in this. And the translation and the music. I don't start with the sheet music and the song like this. I don't open the book and go, okay, I'm going to learn Teuben, and then learn it. I sort of need to hear a cool old version that gets me going and that gives me something to learn from. If I just follow this chart and learn it like this, it's not going to come out right. This is a super useful tool, but it's just a skeleton. It's the bare bones of the story. So it's got the text, it's got the transliteration, it's got a translation. Some of the translations are kind of frustrating because they sort of don't even follow the order of the lyrics, but whatever, that's another story. But it's an amazing resource, but it's not where I learn Yiddish songs from. It's just one part of the puzzle. For me, the important thing is hearing. What gets me going about a Yiddish song are these old recordings of people where it comes from a person who is singing it from experience. It's their cultural music. They haven't learned it from somebody else, and I mean, of course they have, but they've come from this closed, incredible, super sophisticated Yiddish world. And one of the great people that I've heard of that not many people, he's not super well known, is this Noach Nachbush, who was in the Vilna troupe. Actually, his father lived in America, but somehow came back to Poland because he's so religious that he wanted to be back, I guess, near the Hasidic roots of his faith. And Noach Nachbush was like, he studied in Cheder, like a fully Hasidic kind of Yiddish upbringing. He studied Hebrew, he studied Russian, he lived in Vilna, he lived all over the place. He came from a shtetl. Like, his voice, this idea of authenticity is complicated, but to me, he's the guy. He comes from this world, and you can hear it in every note that he sings. So I copy him. Now, the copying, people get turned off by the idea of copying. They think, oh, this is art, this is music, you just express yourself. Well, that may be for certain arts, and actually certain people in the Yiddish music world, eschew copying. They say, no, just take it out of your neshama. The music should just come out of your soul, pure, just raging soul. Perfect klezmer Yiddish is going to come out of you magically. Well, I don't believe in magic like that. I believe in work and study. The only way that I'm going to get to understand this style is to copy it. Not just him. I got to copy a bunch of people. And then by copying and then comparing the similarities between all the different artists, if I copy a cantorial singer, if I copy a Hasidic niggin sung by a group of Hasidim, if I study Yiddish theater songs, it's amazing how you start to see similarities between all these performers. And a style emerges. This is the same with klezmer music. If you study Dave Terrace and Naftuli Brandwein, they're completely different voices, but they're both they're both within the style. So what is the style? If you're not hanging out with Brandvine and he's showing you, you've got to listen to it. Listen to old stuff. And the main trick that I'm going to show you today is the use of a slowing down machine. Okay, so there's something called the Amazing Slowdowner. It's a program, and it plays things. You can change the speed or the pitch of a song without affecting the pitch or the speed of the song, depending on what you want to do. So, when I want to learn a song, I find this, because I heard it and I go, that's a beautiful song, and wow, I could learn a lot from the way that this artist is singing it. The first thing would be to start getting the words down. Okay, so I get my Miltogena Gesang, or I look it up on Zemerl, or I look it up on the internet. There's all these places with Yiddish song lyrics. If it's a weird song, sometimes you don't find it. But a song like Rabbeinu Tam, I did find in one of the Mlotek books. Great. Then I would listen to I would try to learn it in the original Yiddish letters, at least when I'm first trying to hear the version. When I'm listening to Noach Nachbush sing it, I'm going to follow along with the Yiddish, just to compare it, to correct it, to make sure it follows the version I'm learning. He might do little differences with pronunciation based on where he's from or where the song is from, and that's so interesting. And Noach Nachbush is such an interesting voice to learn from because of his roots in Chassidus, his roots in Yiddish theater as a member of the famous Vilna troupe that came to America in the 20s. His roots, like as a religious Jewish person, like coming from the religious tradition. So he just had all that stuff in his head. Start to get the words. Great. Then you start to get the melody. That's a whole story. The whole musical story is maybe is one of the most complicated, but it's not really. It's the same process of listening, slowing down, comparing, contrasting. Another step in this process might be to look up other versions of the song you want to learn. So I'm learning this Noach Nachbush version, and I would play it for you, but do we have 3 minutes? But here, just listen a bit. Okay, I'm not going to play it for you now. I just think it's not a good use of time for this workshop. But maybe I'll put an attachment to it. I'll send it around if you want it somehow. So just getting the words down. But here's what I want to show you. Okay, and here's maybe my magic trick to really trying to get the Yiddish down as a non-Yiddish singer who doesn't know the style. How do you sing it in a legitimate way that honors the tradition and it just isn't homogeneous, it hasn't sort of sanded down all the cool, rough, stylistic edges that give it makes it cool, okay? So here we go. There's a part in the song where he sort of sings a niggin. Okay, ay, 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 ay. Now, when people sing nigunim these days, a lot of the time they're lazy. They go la la la, they go ba ba ba, they go ha ha ha. They just sing it. One rule that I've learned by listening to a million nigunim is that there's a very specific way of singing a niggin. There's a way to enunciate these wordless melodies. It's not just la la la. If you start a phrase, you go bye bye ya ba ba hi ya ya ya. There's a way to start a thing. There's a way to finish a thing. If you have a long tone, you might go ma. You might interchange ba and ma sounds or da or la sounds in order to perfectly enunciate the melody. And if you listen to a group of Hasidim singing, you hear they're all doing it the same. So that tells me, okay, it's not random. They've worked it out. Just like in klezmer, the trills, they're worked out in order to perfectly enunciate the phrase. You put the dreidlach here, no, it's not quite there. It gets in the way of the melody there. Oh, if you put it here, there it goes, but it's not quite right because it ends too abruptly, doesn't finish the thought in the right way. It's got to, so there's this complicated sort of math that goes on. And like I said, I didn't grow up with the tradition, so I have to use sneaky tricks to try to zoom in to things in order to get it. So this program, The Amazing Slow Downer, lets you slow things down. And you start to hear all the details. Now, my brain doesn't work fast enough to work at real speed, so I have to slow it down. I find the section I want. Okay, let's see here. And why this song was interesting to me is that between each verse, he sings the niggin a little differently. So like I said, I've just started the song. I thought it would be cool to see at the beginning of the process. Like, I've never learned this song before. Now I want to learn the song, okay? So between each verse is this niggin enunciated in a different way. Here we go. Let's listen to it this way. Okay, now if you sort of just heard that, you go, I could fake it. I could do something. I heard the melody, I learned the tune, okay, la 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 la. That's cool. But you can only get so far with that, and it won't deepen your understanding of the style if you don't spend a minute trying to get what he did and try to do what he did. So here's that thing, slowed down. So I would start at the beginning, super slow, and I start writing it down. Even though this is wordless. This isn't. There's no words I'm writing down. I'm going to be writing down the niggin. Hi-yi. So already that sort of tells me something. If you're going to start a song, do you start by going la 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 with that pickup? What's like a nice smooth way to pick up into the main melody? Hi-yi. Okay, that's cool. Maybe that's a rule. Maybe that's something that he always does. And if you start to compare, you see, it is kind of a way that he does. He never goes ba 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 ba. It's not a pretty way to do it. It's not musical. So he's coming out of a living tradition that has worked this out for 1,000 years to come up with a sound that is recognizable for them and acceptable and musical and that is decipherable. It's like a bird song. I see it sort of like birds. We are birds. And when we sing, we want another bird to understand what we're saying. And that's why there's these bird songs that are super specific to each species. And you sing, if you go, and if you do it a little wrong, it just doesn't sound right to another bird. They're like, what are you trying to say? So, so hi. Okay, interesting. I mean, maybe this is a little too slow. So let me speed it up. I just want to get a bit of this done. Hiya. Ay, 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 ay. So, ay, 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 ay. He skips a note there. There's a bit of a syncopation he puts in. Okay, so it's a painstaking process of going through it, analyzing it, and this is what musicians do, and that's where I come from. I come to this as a musician, like as a piano player. So some singers might not be comfortable with this sort of level of transcription, but singers we are musicians too. We're not just the singer. I just saw this amazing workshop with Barry Harris, the jazz educator, and he's always trying to get the singers to learn everything the other musicians are learning. Like, if you really want to participate in the music as a singer, you've got to know the nuts and bolts of all the music. So I think, unfortunately, I've run out of time, but I hope that my story and sort of a glimpse at my method is useful for you, no matter what level you are at in Yiddish singing or in Yiddish music or whatever interest level you're at. And just in a word, just keep it real. Follow what touches you. If you're into politics, great, sing political songs. If you're into being funny, you can find funny songs. What's so amazing about this Yiddish music and these Yiddish songs is that there are songs for everybody, and songs for anybody. And also just maybe make goals for yourself. Do you want to sing at the Met? Okay, well, that's going to require a certain amount of structure in your training to get to the Met. If you want to sing for your friends, that's just as legitimate. Like, just know what you want to do with it, so that you're not frustrated or that you're not confused. Why am I doing this? So I hope this has been fun, informative, whatever. I hope it's been something. And it's always interesting for me to try to explain my process, because it helps me as a performer and as someone learning in this beautiful Yiddish tradition that we're all trying to celebrate and trying to share. Thanks a lot, and I hope to see you in person very soon somewhere. Okay? Wait, before I go, just one last thing. I just sort of wanted to sum up a little bit. I just realized I didn't quite finish what I was trying to say with this slowing down process. The point is to get as many of the details as you can, like zooming in closer and closer, and writing it down and puzzling over it. Zooming in is one thing, but also zooming out in time is useful to make things a bit faster, so you see where the music fits in the space. Sometimes if you zoom in too much, you forget the context of what you're learning. So just like just getting as much information, all the little details, then comparing it to other performers. Like I was going to show you, different versions of Rabbeinu Tam. Here's one by this amazing woman, Sarah Nomberg. And I choose the sources to be people from the tradition, but maybe from different elements of the tradition. So there's a great version by Sarah Nomberg. There's a great version by actually Chava Albertstein on a show with Zigan, on a television show. Check that out. Or another great version by Nechama Lifshitz, who's incredible too. And again, do the same process with her. When she sings the niggin, what is she doing to enunciate that wordless song? Or how is she pronouncing these words? And comparing, contrasting all the sources that you can. And this is just the point I wanted to make, was all this copying is not so that you get on stage and you're Nechama Lifshitz. The point is to get on stage as a person who didn't grow up with this tradition maybe, but you want to bring this music to people. So you have Nechama Lifshitz and you studied the way she sang it, and then you have the way Noach Nachbush sang it, and basically you take it all in and copy as slavishly as possible, like really trying to get it, trying to get the little details in there. And then when you're on stage, you can sort of forget that, but hopefully it's gotten into your bones a little bit. And yeah, that's what I wanted to say. Okay, bye again.
Thank you so much, Josh. That was an amazing lecture. Thank you so much. I still remember these huge piles of vinyl records in your Montreal apartment. Okay, folks, now it's a great honor for me to present to you the project Torah Images by the wonderful photographer and video maker Shani Kopitman, whose husband I have the good fortune to be. This project appeared in 2017 and was first presented in the beginning of 2018 in Moldova. The project combines three types of arts: photography, graphics, and music. As part of the project, we tried to recreate scenes from the Torah, starting with the creation of the world and ending with the story of Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses. To date, the project has already performed in Moldova, Germany, Switzerland, Israel, and Japan. So, enjoy!